The Pick Six is back, and after a 1-week hiatus, we are here, Jacob, Brendan, to recap what was an absolutely horrible loss for the Green Bay Packers. Lots to get to. Joe Barry is currently on a train directly into the pits of hell. We'll talk all about it coming up on this edition of the Pick Six. It is so good to be back. I am Brendan Dworzinski. That is Jacob Westendorf, Packers writer for Packers Central. I tweet through my emotions during football games. That's pretty much my Packers claim to fame. We've got a lot to get to this week. I think that goes without saying. Packers lose on Monday Night Football to the New York Giants. And did you know that, breaking news, I was unaware of this, Jacob, Italian people are allowed to play football. I can't believe it. ESPN it had to inform me every 14 seconds that a guy of Italian heritage can play football. I'm shocked. I'm totally shocked. I missed my opportunity, I guess, to celebrate Pierogi Janikowski back in the day for the Raiders, to celebrate Polish heritage, I guess. But that's essentially what I came away from Monday Night Football with. Oh, yeah, and Barry sucks, and Bisaccia sucks. And this offense still is not good enough to play terribly for 3 quarters and win.
No, big shocker there. I'm a little disappointed that they care about Italian people playing, but nobody cares about the overweight, middle-aged white dude talking about football on a StreamYard podcast. But I guess that's the plight I have to live with. You know, the plight of the upper middle class white suburban male is something that tons of people in this country are going to shed tears for, I am sure. But you're right. I saw a stat today in terms, and DVOA is not everything, but the Packers are 10th in offense and 28th in defense and special teams. And I basically said, yeah, that kind of passes the smell test. Like, the offense is good. Like, it's not great. It's not MVP level Aaron Rodgers season awesome, but it's good. It's just not good enough to carry what is a liability on defense and special teams. And, you know, I'm almost never blame the coordinator. Well, not almost never, but I'm rarely blame the coordinator guy, just because I think there's so much more that goes into a professional football game than something as simple. And I also think it's kind of disrespectful to the other team to just say the coach should have done this different. Well, you know, Brian Daboll is pretty smart too, you know, would kind of be my counter most times. It's Tommy freaking DeVito. It is a third-string, undrafted free agent that the University of Illinois did not trust to throw a forward pass. Bad. This is, in my opinion, based on opponent, especially, like adjusted for opponent, this is the worst loss of the season. And I'm not they've played worse in other games, but this is the worst loss of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we'll get more to the game, particularly in a moment. I was joking earlier that I was the bad luck. I couldn't make it to the show the last 2 weeks. Packers come away with those impressive wins. They got the hot streak going. You and Mike Kawano talked about it going into the Chiefs game. You pull away a victory in that one. Like, hey, things are feeling great going into this game, and a really winnable end of the schedule for the Packers. I mean, seriously, and it's still very winnable. There are a lot of games left on this schedule against teams that the Packers theoretically, and I believe, are better than, or at least on equal footing to, but this was also one of those games. And it's just hard for me to feel great. And I'm not as, I was subtweeting. I wasn't going after anyone. I was subtweeting last night that, like, the fan is a fickle thing. To be a fan of a football team, in an era in which you can have an instant reaction and share it out to everybody, it is very fickle, because in one moment it's, hey, did you know not only is Jordan Love the guy, he's also maybe the greatest quarterback of all time a week ago, to now, okay, so he's a bum. Everyone else in the offense is a bum. Everyone else is hurt all the time and they're fragile and they're bums, and all the coaches suck, and LaFleur is bad, and Gutekunst is bad. Like, it flips so quickly. And I don't want to be that guy, because I still think this team is more of, at least offensively, more of what we saw in the previous 3 to 5 weeks than what it was on Monday Night Football. I honestly believe that. I also fully believe this defense stinks. We knew this defense was going to stink. So it's just hard for me, I guess, to reconcile the fact that we're in the same spot we've been in for what, close
25
to a
years.
decade now? Like seriously,
25,
the
yeah.
same spot that this team has an offense that is good enough to win. Again, you cited DVOA earlier, and you're right. It's not everything, but it is a useful stat. It is a useful metric. 10th in the NFL in offensive DVOA this year. That's good. That's really good with a quarterback who's never started before. That's really good. And a ton of young dudes. Awesome. The defense is unplayably bad. The special teams, in my opinion, is even worse. It's just as bad as it was with Sean Menenga, as it was with Mo Drayton. I mean, it's been terrible. It has been awful. And you're stuck in this spot that even though you talked about the last time we were both on the show together, you were talking about culture. And I know you tweeted about this a number of times too. With when the things are going well, you're talking about the culture and you're talking about how Matt LaFleur has instilled that and he empowers the players and they respond to those things. And that's good. And I do believe there is some of that with this team. But I also saw, and I know a lot of people saw it on Monday night, Mike Daniels, great Packer, who tweeted like, hey, Packer fans, what's going on? Like when I was there, I was playing with Hall of Fame caliber players and the same stuff was happening on defense. You've changed the coordinators. You've changed the culture. You've changed all these things. Nothing has changed. My response would be, I don't think the culture has changed defensively and on special teams specifically. And I think that's why we're continuing to be in this spot. Offensively, yes, everything has been altered to some degree over the last few years, whether it's this year with Love stepping in at quarterback, or you want to go back to the start of the Matt LaFleur era in general. I do believe there's a change there. And I think if you're talking conceptually with this team, yes, there has been a positive push and there is a more positive reinforcement. I do believe this is a team that feels like they can win and they belong in the winner's circle. They should win games. I do believe that overall. But what, and I'm asking rhetorically because I know you feel a very similar way, what culture has changed for this defense? This is not an aggressive team. This is not a we're going to punch you in the mouth kind of defense. And it hasn't been since the Super Bowl year or approximately then. Maybe there were one or two. 2014 wasn't a terrible defense by any means, but it's a soft defense. It's not a we're going to go out and beat you kind of defense. And special teams has just been crap. Like it's been shitty for as long as I can remember. Like that is the thing for me. And it's an example of why, and we'll get to Jordan Love too. I know I'm previewing a lot of stuff and teasing a lot here, but we'll get to Love specifically. He was bad for a lot of Monday Night Football. I think you can also pull positives from the fact he made some plays late. That's a good thing. Long-term projection, you like to see a little bit of resilience from him. You like to see the offense was able to do something, even if they got a gift in the form of the dumbest fumble in NFL history from Saquon Barkley. But it's the same things over and over and over again. Dumb penalties, make super soft coverage late in games. I know everyone loves to say, oh, it's soft. It's a little more complex than that, but sometimes it's not more complex than that because we saw Tommy DeVito beat it on Monday Night Football. It's frustrating. More than I'm mad or pissed off about it, Jacob, I'm just frustrated because even though the cast of characters has changed to a large degree, it's the same foundational problems this franchise has had for way too long.
Yeah, and I'm going to it's been interesting, and I often say this to Mike Kawano, how interesting it is to compare the two football teams that we root for and just how polar opposite they really are. University of Michigan football, in my opinion, knows what they are, and they build everything around this idea of who they are and what they're going to be and what they're going to do. The Packers, I think, know that, but they don't want to know that, if that makes any sort of sense. Like their defense has been an afterthought for 15 years. It was, well, we got Aaron Rodgers, and that's going to be enough. And I've always said one of my complaints, one with the way that like the Packer fan base views the offensive line is like, well, we've got Runyon and Rasheed Walker at left tackle right now. And I know Runyon's not a popular guy now, but in the past he has been. Like, that's good enough. Well, good enough's not good enough on the line of scrimmage, and you see what happens when you have quote unquote good enough. Good enough, if you will, was last night against the Giants, and they got smoked. Now I get it. Guys like David Bakhtiari in their prime don't grow on trees, but that's why I'm like, yeah, their first-round pick and offensive lineman should absolutely be in play, if still not the odds-on favorite. We got a long way to go before we start talking about the draft, but the way those things go. the defense for years has, and you've heard them talk about it. We've got sound bites from players of saying, well, we just need to be enough to get 12 the ball back. It's like, well, that's not. And then you listen to the way like Ray Lewis's Baltimore Ravens talked about those teams, or Richard Sherman's Seattle Seahawks talked about those teams. It's like, yeah, both of those guys are annoying blowhards. Like, but at the same time, those defenses were awesome. I just named the two best defenses in the modern era. Those two in the 85 Bears. Like, that's it. As far as great defenses, Green Bay doesn't know what they want to be. You know, Brian Gutekunst goes into press conferences and talks about how we're really close to building a dominant defense. Well, Brian, you're 32nd in the NFL in EPA per play and yards per carry since you took over as general manager. And you stood on that podium after you got embarrassed by the 49ers in the NFC title game. Somebody asked you a question about your run defense, and you basically say, we like the guys we have. Excuse me? Like, you like the guys you have. The guys you have just gave up 200 some odd yards. The Packers this season spent so much time talking about, it's a different mindset, it's a different defense, and you'll see we'll be better against the run. Well, they've given up 200 rushing yards 4 times this season. That is second in Packers history to the 1983 Green Bay Packers, and shout out at Packers history, Michael Benson, for that. The 1980s Packers teams are synonymous with crappy defenses. Lynn Dickey and all that high-flying offense with John Jefferson and James Lofton. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, we got those guys, but you can't stop anybody. And for years, special teams, that's not even like Rich Bisaccia. They hired Mo Drayton because he was standing there. You know, Bisaccia, It took a literal catastrophe in a playoff game that cost you a chance at the Super Bowl for them to do something different with special teams. And it's not like they haven't tried, but they just don't think about that kind of stuff. And now, like, Bisaccia's thing was always, his special teams for the most part in Oakland, Las Vegas were pretty average. Well, average would have been a welcome sight. This is not an average special teams. This is not an average defense. And again, I mean, we're looking at the point now. We're going to get to one of my least favorite talking points when it comes draft season. Throw another first round pick on defense. I'm sure that'll fix it. Well, yeah, if the defense sucks, you don't stop adding to it. I feel like that's a completely ridiculous talking point. Like, just say you want them to pick a receiver in the first round. Like, that's at least honest. Instead of this disingenuous stuff. You know, the defense now, the problem, one of several problems I think they have is the style of defense they play, I don't like, and they never really change from it. Like, they'll play that same style against Patrick Mahomes and say, don't get beat over the top, which against Patrick Mahomes, that makes some sense. But then they run that against Tommy DeVito and Kenny Pickett, and these teams run for 200 plus yards, and they just never really change anything off of it. I am ready for them to bring in some guy who is just the meatball of all meatball. Like, dig Buddy Ryan up from his grave and see if he wants to coach some defense for a couple of weeks. Like, I just want to see, Dom Capers was a tactician. Mike Pettin, not really a tactician, but he changed his ways of thinking. That's not meant to be disrespectful to Pettin. It's just he was a little closer to this meatball thing than what I'm talking about. And I think you got to circle that white whale, and I'm hoping that root for the Jets to lose a bunch of games and see if Robert Saleh wants to come here. Otherwise, if Saleh can't, if they don't fire him or whatever in terms of the Jets, then find some guy out of San Francisco, some guy on Dan Quinn's staff, somebody who is putting together good defense and consistently good defense and changing this culture to where guys played discipline. They played sound assignments. Last night, the pass rush, like, they were winning off their blocks, but they were just undisciplined and wild. That's why DeVito had as much chance as he did to step up into the pocket and run for what felt like 250 yards. Like, it's not good enough, and it hasn't been good enough. And, I kind of want to ask if I get a chance to talk to Brian Gutekunst at some point. Like, all of these things have happened. You've changed coordinators, you've changed schemes, you've changed identities, you've changed quarterbacks to try and play things differently, all that stuff. And you're still bad. Do you need to adjust the way you look at defensive players? Do you need to find guys, stuff like that? The Packers defense right now is so short on playmakers. It is incredible. They don't force turnovers. Yep. There is, and Charles Woodson might be the greatest defensive back in the history of football. I'm not saying find him, but even like Rashawn Gary, kind of a playmaker, but he's not Nick Bosa. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not that level of player, which is fine. There's not very many guys like that, but they don't have the other, like Jair Alexander when he plays. He's really good. Really good. Is he a playmaker in the yoke of, Charles Woodson or somebody who's got sticky fingers? Not really. Their safeties are bad.
They're terrible. Let's be like I hate to be the meatball here for a moment. I know you have a point to finish, but like if I never see the current number 26 put on that Packers jersey ever again, I will be happy. I will feel great because good God, man, he is bad. Like it's that. It's like it's the same guys and you're doing the same thing over and over. It's the old, what's the definition of insanity cliche? Like how do you look at the way the season has ended year after year after year? 4 times this year, you've given up 200 yards. You met Tommy DeVito, Kenny Pickett, these terrible. Matt Canada coordinated an offense that got 200 rushing yards against this team this year. Look at the playoff losses in recent memory. The one to the 49ers, disaster, complete disaster in that one. Well, you can name a bunch of 49ers games like that, but the one in the 2021 season, the previous one, 2019 NFC Championship game against the 49ers, embarrassing. You got your ass kicked up and down the field. NFC Championship game 2016 against the Falcons, ass kicked up and down the field. I know everyone was injured for that game, but still the point remains. Like it's the same thing over and over and over again because I'm right there with you. Like if you are Matt LaFleur, if you're the coordinators, like if you're Barry, Bisaccia, Drayton, whoever is in the position any given time, how do you not say this can never happen again? I know we've referenced the Chiefs a number of times on the show for various comparison purposes, and this year it's a little bit of an off year for them, but you have to go back to Super Bowl 55, and they were banged up. They had no depth on the offensive line, and they played you at center, and I was starting at right tackle. Like it was a disaster. And their GM, it took a year to get back to the Super Bowl. Wow, a whole year to get back to a Super Bowl. And Brett Veach said, this will never happen again. As long as we've got that guy, 15 at quarterback, we will never go with an offensive line anywhere close to this again. What did they do? They drafted maybe the best center in football in Creed Humphrey. They put a pick on Trey Smith, who should have been a day 2 guy, but because of medicals dropped. They paid out the ass to get Joe Thuney. They added Orlando Brown, who wasn't even that great, but they had to make a splash to get a left tackle.
You look like an all-pro next to these bums they line up now, though. My God.
Well, yeah, if I never have to watch Donovan Smith play again, I'll also be very happy. But like that is what that team did. And not every team builds the same way, and I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that. But when you see the same result year after year, week after week, how do you not at least question the process, right?
Yeah, the process has to be questioned because, again, Brian Gutekunst has been the general manager since 2018. That's a 5-year sample where they're at the bottom of the NFL and stopping the run. They don't even slow down opposing teams' run games for the most part. Like, it is embarrassingly bad. When you were saying, like, this will never happen again, that reminded me, granted, different era of football, and Vince Lombardi is Vince Lombardi, but they lose the 1960 NFL championship game to the Eagles. And Lombardi says after the game to his team, this will never happen to us again. And they never lost a championship game again under him. Like at some point, like you said, when do you have to do something different? And I don't know what that is because they've done a lot of stuff. It's just, they're not good enough in the areas that they need to be better at. And like the stuff that they've drafted to be quote unquote dominant isn't good enough. Like their pass rush, a really good dominant pass rush, whatever, should not be getting shut down by the New York Giants. Sorry, who
aren't even at full strength on the line.
Right. And they're bad when they're at full strength. They had allowed 69 sacks on the season coming into the game. Like embarrassingly bad up front. And they got manhandled. So that's not good. The secondary that you built, that's supposed to be awesome, albeit injured. Jair Alexander's hurt. Darnell Savage, not good. Eric Stokes, injured. Keyshawn Nixon was the guy that you tabbed as your nickel corner. That hasn't worked. Like the safety position has been a wasteland for Well, just really this season, but still, Savage didn't work. It didn't have, and you drafted him clearly to play Mike Pettine's defense. And then when you change coordinators, it completely changed Darnell Savage's. But when everybody talks about like, oh, just change Joe Barry and that'll fix everything or whatever. Well, Mike Pettin was a coordinator not that long ago, and we couldn't wait to get rid of him either. And they're the same / worse, whatever way you want to put it. Change the coordinators, change the scheme, change whatever. But I think this team needs a soul searching from the deepest core values of this organization. If they're going to build a defense that's worth a damn, like at this point, I would settle for average. And I know they're top 10 in scoring defense or whatever. And that's like, a lot of people use that as like, like they poo-poo that as if it's not something. It is, but there's plenty of other metrics and stuff to look at to where, like, yeah, the Packers are a bounce or two. Now, granted, on the same token, they're a bounce or two away from being 9-3, but they're a bounce or two away from being 4-9. Chargers catch a couple passes. Initials boy gets the PI call for Carrington Valentine tackling him. Then, maybe things are a little bit different in Packer land right now. I don't know. That's just kind of the way football works, but there is way, 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 way too much investment in this defense over the last decade and a half. The only offensive player they've selected in the first round since 2010 is Jordan Love. That's a lot of investment on the defense for it to have been bad for as long as it has been. And it's kind of that old, again, find that meatball, find me Coach Yost, defense's desire. And give me the guy who's talking like Buddy Ryan saying quarterbacks are overpaid, pompous bastards that need to go down and go down hard. And I know that's not legal anymore, but I don't care. Take a 15. No, I'm kidding about that part. But like, get somebody who says every game, like, did you ever see the Mighty Ducks, Brendan?
Yes.
Okay. The third one, when they're all grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Coach O'Ryan comes in and is talking about like, the Ducks are kind of known for their offense and doing the flying V and flipping the puck all over the place and stuff like that. Well, then Coach O'Ryan is trying to teach them how to hunt goose eggs. And he says, if you're going to hunt goose eggs, you got to start early. Their goal is to win 1-0, essentially. Now, does Green Bay need to have a goal of winning 1-0? No. But can I get the defensive coordinator Can I get the defensive coordinator who's coming and preaching like, hey, they're not going to score. So, offense, I need you to kick a field goal. Like Brian Flores, I know he's getting a lot of praise and he deserves it recently. Could Green Bay in the history, Brendan, do you think win a game 3-0?
No.
Not a chance in hell, right? Like, there's no way that they could do something like that with the way they play defense over the years. Like, that's the type of culture shock I think they need.
No, I agree with you. Two things real quick, though. One, do you know where Fielding Yost coached before Michigan? One of the places he coached before Michigan?
Well, since you're asking, I'm going to guess the University of Kansas, but no, I don't know that.
Up there. Yep. One season, 10-0, undefeated, 1900. Your undefeated Kansas Jayhawks. Missed those days.
Yeah, I was there. I watched.
The other thing, though, and this is going to sound like a bizarre, unhinged take, honestly, but that's with all the complaints and all of that, like all of that is fair. I think we made jointly some good points there. I'm like weirdly content with the game. I mean, I'm pissed that the Packers lost because I always am, and I'm frustrated by the defense and the special teams and the fact that Rich Bisaccia got a raise and somehow the special teams got worse. Like that kind of thing is really frustrating to me. But by the same token, this game sort of encapsulated like what I've kind of felt about this Packers team all year long. Like the offenses, in terms of long-term future health of the franchise, the most important part of this season was finding out whether or not Jordan Love is the guy. And as long as you get a definitive answer to that, this season like served its purpose. And we've talked about that a ton over the course of the year. I think we have gotten to that point. I think Jordan Love is going to end up being the guy, whatever his future contract looks like, whatever. But I think the Packers have gotten enough that they are going to stick with him long-term. I think he has played really well. I think in that game last night, for example, I said this earlier, he was bad, not just iffy. No, he was bad for a majority of the game. But when he got a chance late, had to make a couple of plays, had to make a couple of throws, He did, and that is valuable. Sometimes football comes down to who makes fewer mistakes, and the Packers, it looked for a moment like they may have been able to just take advantage of enough mistakes by the Giants to win. So that's a positive thing to me. I wanted to see that kind of thing. We've seen these receivers grow up and become much better players. Wicks is a dude. Reed is a dude. We saw, and it's why it sucks Watson got hurt again. We've seen Watson get back in a rhythm, positive things, all good. Tucker Kraft, awesome. Great.
Jack Rabbits. Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
did you see that quote?
Awesome.
The one about how,
about blocking.
Yes. Oh my God. Like,
can we get that to
that attitude on defense? Exactly.
Yeah. Can Kraft play defensive end too? Can you go both ways? Like that's the kind of attitude though that this team needs. All sorts of great stuff for the offense. I wanted to see that more than anything else this year because I already knew this defense sucked. It's not coached well. It's got a bad, the culture of it is bad. The idea behind it, the just general construction of it is poorly put together. It is also just poor in general. I knew the special teams were going to be bad, although not this bad. Like, if anything, this game, as frustrating as it was, it almost felt like, I don't know, reaffirming like everything I sort of felt or wanted out of this season I got, and everything I already thought I knew just was sort of reaffirmed. It's weird. I don't want to feel that way, but I feel like, one, Packers are kind of playing with house money after beating both the Chiefs and the Lions, house money, quote unquote. So it didn't maybe hurt as much as it would have if the Packers had, say, lost last week. But I don't know. It felt kind of weird for me after the game. Like I wasn't wishing I was dead. I was just sort of like wishing I had maybe like never survived birth, that kind of thing. So slightly down the totem pole.
As somebody who survived the umbilical cord being wrapped around my neck 3 times, I can understand the survival of birth thing you got there. And unfortunately, I did make that out alive. But I don't agree. The reality is the status quo has changed, to quote Ben Gates' dad from National Treasure. I mean, if you had told me that, hey, they're 6-7, they beat the Giants, but they lost to the Chiefs, I'd have been like, that makes sense. The problem is they did beat the Chiefs and they did beat the Lions, 2 teams that are better than them, which means I went from having no expectations to having expectations. Now the expectation, in my opinion, is insert your Jim Mora meme. It's the playoffs, and it should be, because if you're able to put games together like that and beat the Giants, should beat the Giants, beat the Chiefs and the Lions and the Chargers with Justin Herbert, like, you should feel like you are expecting to beat the New York Giants. And this is the biggest problem I have. The Packers lost on a field goal at the buzzer, right? They were lucky to be in that position in the first place. Saquon Barkley with an egregious fumble while the team was trailing 21-16 at the time. Like, the Giants are going to score on that drive if Saquon doesn't fumble the football. Saquon might have scored on that play if he doesn't get in a fight in the turf monster and fall down and fumble. Like, Green Bay was outplayed by a team that I think before the game started, like, the advanced numbers have the Giants as the worst team in the NFL, not named the Carolina Panthers. So the worst actual NFL team is the New York Giants. And Green Bay lost to them, was outplayed by them relatively severely. Now, like you said, are there some positives to take away? Sure. The Tucker Kraft thing, like you mentioned, is awesome. Jordan Love's resiliency after a not great first 3 quarters. Putting together a game-winning drive, that is stuff that is hard to do. And it's a positive thing. But I don't want to Tim Tebow this thing either. Like, I'm not going to give him like this huge kudos for being crappy for 3 quarters and great for the 4th quarter. And great is even a stretch for the 4th quarter. Like, they could have stolen one last night and they didn't. But the reality of the situation is they shouldn't have even been in position to steal it. They had 3 turnovers, 2 really terrible turnovers by Jordan Love, and then Keyshawn Nixon's, which was not great either. They would have been, and the Giants' turnovers, it's not like Green Bay even forced them. Like, they were self-inflicted wounds. Saquon just dropped the ball and a punt happened to fall out of the sky and touch a Giants gunner. Like, they got lucky on both of their turnovers. So they didn't even really force those. So they're -1 in the turnover differential and had a chance to win. I knew they weren't going to run the table. Like for anybody to say, oh, they're going to go 11-6, that would have meant they won 8 straight games to close out the season. Couldn't have pictured that. Like in reality, they were always going to slip up against somebody. But the Giants and the Panthers were the 2 games, in my opinion, over the stretch that would have been unacceptable to do that in. And it was unacceptable. The way Green Bay played, their special teams, their penalties, allowing, again, Tommy DeVito sucks. Forgive me, Mafia. Please don't kill me in my sleep unless you really want to, in which case I might welcome it. But Tommy DeVito is terrible. A 3rd string, undrafted. This isn't some super success story. And I know they were trying to yuck that up on ESPN last night, and that is their job, so I get it. This is a team that won 10-7 against the New England Patriots, who barely roster an offense. Like, Tommy DeVito stinks. Darren Waller wasn't out there last night. Hakeem Nicks and Victor Cruz were not out there last night. Like, it was Wan'Dale Robinson. Horrible. Like I said, they played worse against the Raiders. They played worse, maybe, against the Broncos. Last night's game was the worst loss of the season because the Giants are really bad. Really bad. Like, I don't even know what else to say about that. Like, that's why this is so disappointing, because Green Bay had, and not only that, they had a chance to take a string. The Rams lost. Every team that could have gone, except the Vikings, did them a favor. The Packers could have taken a stranglehold on that participation trophy wild card, which is what I call the 7th seed. They could have done that, and instead now they fell back to the pack. No pun intended.
I mean, I don't disagree with anything you had. Like, again, admittedly unhinged take. I guess it's just a matter of I haven't really changed my expectations as much, and maybe that is, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to handle it. I mean, it sucks. Like, I'm consciously aware of the fact that last night was awful. I mean, it was a miserable game. The offense was not good enough. Guys got hurt. That's the other thing, too. The fact that you come out of this game with Jaden Reed now getting tested for a concussion and Dontavian Wicks getting hurt, like, great. I think
Wicks
it might have been
not playing on Sunday. Like, he basically,
well, based on what he said about his ankle, yeah, that doesn't make me feel all that great. And if Reed can't go, who knows what Watson's going to look like? Who knows what Aaron Jones is going to be able to do? I mean, good luck, Jordan. And I feel like there's not a whole lot of reason to have confidence. Now, I don't think the Buccaneers are very good. We'll get a pick a little bit later on, but still, they're better than the Giants. They're better than that. Are you going to be able to take down that team? I don't know. And
just
and that's
put up 35 against a pretty damn good Falcons defense. So
yeah,
Baker's my guy too. So
I love Baker. I love Baker Mayfield. So I
was never
root for him in every other game but this one.
Oh yeah, as soon as he ran to the middle of that stupid O in the middle of that crappy stadium and stuffed the flag in the middle of it, I was hooked for life. And not only that, the whole thing of like I woke up feeling dangerous. He's awesome. You know, that's he is. But he's prone to throwing the ball to the other team. So the Packers are going to need something like that too for this week, just because the Bucs still have like the structure and the talent kind of the team that played against Green Bay the last couple of years. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin's still there. Antoine Winfield's still there. Tristan Wirf's still there. Like they've got good play. Vita Vea, he's awesome. Like they've got guys. They just, they have a below average high variance starting quarterback. Like that's kind of what they have. So they're in first place. So like the other thing about this isn't a team coming from the South to the North in the cold with nothing to play for, when teams are prone to kind of just say, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Like just not what's going to happen. Tampa Bay's in first place in the NFC South right now.
Yeah. One other thing the Packers will have in this game, and as much as I think the coaching staff deserves a lot of flack for what happened on Monday night, they are a better coaching staff, or at least the head coach, Matt LaFleur, is better than Todd Bowles, because there might not be a worse coach in the NFL. I don't feel like enough people talk about how god-awful Todd Bowles is.
Brandon Staley. Oh, God, this could be a fun list.
Staley's pretty bad.
Up there.
He's getting fired.
Bowles is awful. Frank Reich. Although he's not a head coach anymore.
He's not a head coach anymore.
You got fired. Frank got one and done twice. So
Not one and done twice, but he was the first coach ever to be fired in back-to-back years.
that's what it was. Okay. Let's see who else. Anthony Lynn is not a head coach anymore, but he was definitely a fun guy to bet against and make fun of.
Yeah, he wasn't very good.
This is a Matt Bove question. Where's Matt Bove when you need him? But yeah, Todd Bowles is awful as a head coach. Defensive coordinator, sign me up tomorrow. But yeah, head coach. Never met a punt.
Fired?
Maybe. Yeah, why not? Never met a punt he didn't like.
Yeah, great. Love that. Love that kind of strategy. We've already hit on a lot of the offense and the fact that they sucked. They made some big plays late, got lucky a few times. That kind of covers it for the offense right now. I do feel like it's worth bringing up the kicking situation. Look, man, I understand the desire to let him work through it. And if any franchise is going to be patient with a kicker who is not missing every single kick, it's going to be the Green Bay Packers. We have plenty of evidence from the Mason Crosby era, and I love Mason. Nothing but respect for number 2. I feel bad that he got cut by the Rams after like 6 hours with the team. But Carlson's not been good, and think that's a major problem at this point. He has missed numerous clutch kicks, and I know you can't do if he made this kick, then the Packers would have won because they were down 2 and it would have given them 3 points. Well, yes, but a whole lot of other things also change if one play changes. That's kind of how football works. That being said, he missed a kick that he should have been able to make, and the Packers ended up losing by 2. So it's not the kind of thing that I think you can also just easily gloss over. I don't know. I don't think the Packers are going to kick him to the curb, but it is also clear that he is not exactly a superstar. We don't have Younghoe Koo or Justin Tucker out there right now. And again, for a team that's got to win on the margins and has to do things, has to avoid the dumb mistakes, special teams penalties, offensive penalties, things like that, even the little 5-yard ones, certainly 10 or 15 yards, those things hurt you. Same thing in the kicking game. Missing makeable kicks is not something you can afford to do if you are in the situation the Packers are in. I don't really know what the solution to it is, but it's also very clear that, like the rest of the special teams, that is a net negative right now. At least that's how I view it.
Well, Matt LaFleur doesn't, and neither does the rest of the organization, because LaFleur was asked today a question inspired by yours truly. Said he was absolutely committed to Anders Carlson for the rest of the season, because I wondered, Green Bay said they were ready to weather the storm and all that stuff. And that was cool. You can weather the storm and have a kicker miss kicks when you're 3-6. Kickers missing kicks now might be the difference in making the playoffs versus not. And Anders Carlson was coming off of a big week where he made all of his kicks against Kansas City, drilled that field goal late. They put them up 8, which was one of the low-key biggest plays of the game because it guaranteed the Packers couldn't lose in regulation at minimum. But it's been tough, and I don't see – granted, I'm not a kicking expert by any stretch of the imagination. I hate kickers and punters and, not football players in general. But I don't know where the ups really have been. Like I said, he had that game against the Chiefs. That was awesome. He hit a long field goal against Chicago in week 1. But otherwise, it's not like I'm like – I watched that dude from the Cowboys on Sunday night, and – he's making field goals from 60 with relative. Like he looks
Brandon
like
Aubrey. Yeah.
Yeah. He looks like Nigel Gruff. Kick the bloody piss out of it, man. Like it's so, I shouldn't say easy, but find a kicker. And you didn't have to draft one, and he wasn't that good in college. He's not that good now. Last week was the first week. He missed a kick against Minnesota and got a mulligan because of an offsides. So if you take that out, before last week against Kansas City, he had missed a kick in every single game since the bye week, whether a PAT or a field goal. Last night, again, he missed a field goal. And when Jordan Love got sacked on that 3rd down, did you have any confidence he was making that kick at all?
No.
And that's kind of how I judge my kickers. When Mason Crosby walked onto the field, there were some exceptions to that where I was like, yeah, I have confidence he's going to put that thing through the uprights. Now, should Green Bay be spending money on a kicker like that in a transition season? Probably not, but I don't know. I would at least be bringing in competition and trying to make him prove that he's worth his job. Anders Carlson is not thank God, not a first round draft pick. It's not like somebody that should be guaranteed a position on the team. So what's wrong with a little bit of competition, even just to like scare him straight and just say, listen, dude, you don't make your kicks. Like I can call this dude in 10 seconds.
I mean, shoot, that's what the Rams did this week with Mason Crosby. They brought him in and said, hey, Lucas Haversick, your job is on the line. And, well, it ended up working out. Now, I do want to mention something from this is from Todd in the YouTube comments, who is, make sure you're checking out on Wednesday night, one of the hosts of Lombardi's Bar, Game on Wisconsin's #1 softcore pornography show. And Todd says, look, if a game is against a bad team, what was that?
Yeah, if it's softcore, you haven't watched recently.
If a game against a bad team is coming down to a rookie kicker, it's everyone else's fault. I actually agree with that. I am firmly in the camp that if a game is going to come down to one single play, you messed up. A game should not come down to one single play, especially when you are playing a team like the New York Giants. And I hope I didn't misrepresent myself here. I do not think that the Packers lost because of Anders Carlson. He is well down the list of things that went wrong on Monday Night Football. I just think it is worth bringing up. He is someone who you hoped would be solid this year, and I don't think he has shown personally a whole lot of solid level play. The number one thing from kickers, in my opinion, you got to have consistency. You have to know game to game that guy is going to, we know what we can expect out of him. And if that is inside of 45, he's going to make 100% of kicks. Outside of 45, he'll never make one. At least you know. Like, at least you know what the limitations are. Right now, I feel like you don't with Carlson. Maybe it works out. I hope it does. I think he's got, obviously, a lot of physical gifts in that right leg. I hope it works out. I have been unmoved so far, I guess is what I would say. Yeah, and like you said, if it comes down to a kicker against a crappy team, then yeah, that would be a problem. Like, you have a lot of, and again, like I said, there's a lot of other things. We have this weird tendency as people on Twitter to want to just blame one thing for when the game goes wrong. Like, it's okay to say, yeah, Anders Carlson should make a 45-yard field goal. That is objectively true. Is that the reason Green Bay lost? No, there's a lot of other things that happened leading up to that point. But again, I've talked about this a bunch since the season started. Green Bay does not have the margin for error that they used to. The margin for error when MVP Aaron Rodgers was under center is just so altogether, like they could miss a field goal and rebound from it. Maybe not in a playoff game sometimes, but like they could miss a field goal and be fine because the offense can score 30. Well, I don't know if Green Bay's offense can score 30. We were talking about how awesome they were against Kansas City. They scored 27. I know they scored 30 against Detroit, but they got points on defense in that game. Like, I don't know if their offense can score 30 points. So they don't have the ability to overcome stuff like that in the way that they used to. The difference in these games, the Packers have lost like 5 games this year by 4 points or less. Zach Jacobson had something earlier about how like it's the parallel between 2008 and this year, which of course everybody's going to do, which is fine. But it's just not something they can afford. And that's the part where their staunchness in like, this is our guy. You better be right next year is all I'm saying. Because like this year, fine, whatever. They've committed to going young. They might as well go young. There's no point in going out and signing Mason Crosby right now to be their kicker. Unless Carlson, knock on wood, gets hurt or something like that. Mm-hmm. But you better be right next year because this is a team who, the Packers are a good offseason, in my opinion, away from being a playoff contender and in an NFC where, who knows? This year, the NFC looks to have I'd be curious your opinion on this. The NFC, in my opinion, has 2 teams that can play in the Super Bowl this year. San Francisco and Dallas. That's it. Like, who knows what happens next year? Dallas is going to look different. San Francisco is going to look different. That's just how it is. Mm-hmm. A good offseason, hire the right guy, defensive coordinator, add a couple playmakers here or there. Like, Green Bay could be a team that's right in the mix next year. You can't, part of that needs to be getting the kicker right. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. For the record, I'm mostly with you. I think San Francisco and Dallas are by far the best teams in the conference. I wouldn't completely write Philly off. I've been saying for a while that I am concerned about them, but they've still got a lot of the bones of a team that made it to a Super Bowl a year ago. They're still a good team for sure, even though they've kind of gotten blasted the last few weeks and have been bullied to a degree we really haven't seen from the Eagles recently. So I would put them a distant third, but I'd say it's still possible. I mean, anyone gets hot, they can make it in. I don't think anyone's got the gear. The Eagles can get to a gear that the 49ers and Cowboys have been playing with over the last several weeks. I think that's what keeps them in the discussion. Like, I know I come off as biased because I say this about the Lions all the time, and we're on a Green Bay Packers podcast right now, and our feelings on the Lions are probably pretty obvious. I don't think the Lions have that juice. Like, I do not think they have a level they can get to.
The Lions should have gotten swept by the Bears. And I know Justin Fields is going to the Hall of Fame. I completely understand that he was a Hall of Famer before he threw a single forward pass in the NFL. And I understand all that. Please, Chicago, please talk yourself into him. I am begging you. Listen to me.
Extend Fields.
He's your guy. He is your guy. Make sure you keep him. But
yeah, no, I generally agree with you. But it's open. That's feeds your point, though. It's very open. And I've been saying from the very beginning, I told you at the time, I've said it ever since. I've put it on Twitter, whatever. 2024, I think this team has a chance to be really good. But you've got to still make more strides. You can't just say, oh, well, cool. Some things are on the right schedule. Awesome, sick. We're good to go going forward. That's really not how it works. You do have to keep finding a way to improve. Real quick, before we get to picks for the Buccaneers game this weekend, real quick, anyone else who really did jump out as having a positive game for you on Monday?
I know Malik Heath only had the one catch, but damn, man, like, to be able to make that play in that moment as an undrafted rookie who's pressed into action, like, that was nice to see. And they're going to need him. You know, Green Bay's best, Romeo Doubs, is still healthy. And that might be it as far as like their preferred top receivers. You know, Watson, who knows? Jaden Reed, concussion protocol, who knows? Samori Toure was catching passes last night. Man, that is not a positive situation for the Packers offense. No, with all due respect to Samori Toure, he was a healthy scratch for the last month for a reason. And that just is what it is. But yeah, Malik Heath, Matt Schneidman puts out a story about him in The Athletic. And then, like, you got to love this when this happens to you guys. I remember when something similar happened to me with Joe Thomas. He was a linebacker that was like doing some stuff in coverage for Green Bay. And then I wrote a story about him for what is now the defunct fanragsports.com. And Joe Thomas got an interception.
Fanrag. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a blast from the early 2010s past.
Yeah. Shout out John Owning, who's now at PFF, I think. I'd have to check again. He's a Cowboys fan, but we forgive him for that, I guess. If you forgive people for being satanic, then I suppose you can forgive that. But I wrote a story about that, and Joe Thomas got an interception like that night. It was just like that story blew up. And the other time I had that happen was I said Richard Rodgers needs to play less, and that was the night he caught the Hail Mary from Aaron Rodgers. So that went really well. But the point I'm getting at with that is, yeah, Schneidman writes that story about Malik Heath, and then he catches 2 game-winning touchdowns. Only one of them counted, and neither was, I guess, a game winner. 2 go-ahead touchdowns. But he's going to have to make some plays for them this week because, again, you and I might be playing receiver by this point.
Yeah, and just to build on the play of the receivers, I think Malik Heath gets credit. I mean, he almost had a touchdown on the play before, and you're right, he's going to have to do more. I mean, the guy for me is Jaden Reed because he is such a weapon, and I know that everyone got sick of the fly sweeps and jet sweeps as the game went on and didn't like the 2-point conversion play. I get it. That's a special player right there, and I don't know if he will ever be, a number 1 wide receiver, quote unquote, around that entire sentence or the entire phrase right there, but you can get him the ball and he is going to make a play for you. And I do appreciate the fact that even though the play calls didn't work because the Giants became privy to it after a while, the Packers did what they could to get him the ball. I always want that from my offense, and I appreciate that from Matt LaFleur. Number 11 right now, your most dynamic playmaker you have out there on the field, get him the ball. Packers did. They found a way to get him the ball. Most of the time, good things happen when you throw it toward number 11 or you hand it off to him. So that's a positive. Seeing that touchdown run, that was fun. Kayvon Thibodeau, who I think he is a really good player for the Giants. And I think another example of the whole, do they really care about football stuff during the draft is so nonsensical because who gives a shit? He's really good at it. Who cares? The
Jaguars had a chance they took a pass rusher. And the 2 guys drafted after the one they took was the better player. Yeah. Kayvon and then Hutchinson.
Both of them. Miles, what has Trayvon Walker done? That's not even like rhetorical. Like, seriously, what has he done in his career?
I don't have a good answer for you. I'd have to look, but I mean, I don't. And granted,
This
this
is
is as cash gets, but I don't see highlights of him coming across the screen like I do those other two guys.
No, I guess he's got 5 sacks this year, had 3.5 last year. But like, you want a guy who's got double figure numbers like a Kayvon Thibodeau or like an Aiden Hutchinson or athletes like that. But that, so be it. It is what it is. But no, Reed is that kind of guy. He is the kind of guy you want to try to force feed the ball to. Not all the time. He's not Devontae Adams. Let's not be stupid about this, but he is a player you want to let make plays with the ball in his hands because he is so dynamic. And because sometimes if you call the right play, he's going to put a really good defensive end like Kayvon Thibodeau in the torture chamber, like on that touchdown sweep in the game on Monday night. So more Jayden Reed, good. Hopefully he is not fully concussed and he's able to go on Sunday, because the Packers are going to need some help on offense because seemingly everyone is banged up. And that brings us to Sunday afternoon, Lambeau Field, going to be cold. Buccaneers coming up north. Doesn't always work out. We will see what happens on Sunday. Packers are favored in this one. Not a surprise. Over-under currently sitting at 41.5. Not really surprised by that number either. Maybe even feels a little bit high. I guess Buccaneers put up plenty of points this past week. What is the key to this game? What is the one thing the Packers have to do right? The mistake they cannot make if they're going to come away with this win?
Well, number one, first and foremost, is they need some bodies back. They're not getting, like, Musgrave's not coming back, but like, can you get Watson? I don't know, probably not. But can Reed clear the protocol, and can they get Aaron Jones? At that point, you can make enough chicken salad out of what against this Bucs team. The big thing to me is, again, if Baker Mayfield can stand in the pocket, scan and deliver, he's good. The difference between good and great is usually the guys that can do stuff when not everything's perfect. See Mahomes, Patrick, Allen, Josh, for example. But they've got to heat this guy up. And you saw him last year. He turned the ball over a couple times when he was with the Rams. I kind of throw that game out because he'd only been there for 10 seconds. And the previous year on Christmas Day, he threw 4 picks and could have thrown like 6. You got to make plays on those passes. And the turnover margin for Green Bay has been so critical this year. They're undefeated, I believe, when they win. They only have 1 loss or something like that when they win the turnover battle. Do you know, Brendan, that how many current corners on Green Bay's roster? Do you know how many interceptions the current corners on Green Bay's roster has?
I do.
It's 1. Keyshawn Nixon over Signal Gate last week. And yeah, that's tough. You got to make more plays than that. Quay Walker has more dropped interceptions than the Packers corners have interceptions. Now, maybe they get Stokes back. Maybe he plays. I don't even know. The last time he came back, he only played special teams and popped his hamstring shortly thereafter. Maybe Jair Alexander's back. That situation is weird, to say the very least. Like, I don't even really know what to make of that, but that's odd. And hopefully he's able to suit up, because Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. I just mentioned a Hall of Famer and Chris Godwin, like 2 pretty good receivers there.
Yeah.
The good news is Tampa can't really run the ball, so it's like the stoppable force meets the movable object in the run game, which is a good thing for Green Bay. But they got to have better than what they had the other night, and they're facing a much better offense than the one they faced on Monday night. So again, make Baker Mayfield be the guy who is turnover prone and catch the ball when he throws it to you.
I mean, you have to get a pass rush. You have to get him under pressure. And that was the thing that often spelled his doom when he was in Cleveland. And I know, he's been in and out of various lineups the last couple of years, but generally speaking, when you get him pressured, he is more prone to making those mistakes. And you just can't live with a pass rush that was as feeble as it was against the Giants. I mean, you're just never going to find long-term success in the NFL if you're playing like that. And can you do it? Can you do it against that offensive line? Their offensive line is banged up too. It's better than New York's is, though. I don't think many lines could be worse unless you're Carolina. Like that's it pretty much. That is the basement. So you've got to be able to get pressure on Mayfield, turn the ball over somehow. I don't know what that looks like. Fumble. Mayfield does fumble the ball, or at least during his starting when we thought he was going to be the future in Cleveland, he fumbled the ball quite a bit. So whatever you can do to force turnovers, you've got to do it. And that's going to start with getting pressure on Baker Mayfield. I don't honestly have a whole lot of faith in this Packers front to do that at this point, because again, they got shut down by the Giants offensive line on Monday night. But that's the number one thing for me. In terms of the bodies, Todd on YouTube brought this up, something that I had the exact same thought. But I think it's probably tough since the secondary is so thin. You really probably can't risk using Keyshawn Nixon offensively too much. But if you're short on bodies, might as well get one of your most dynamic guys out there and give him a play or two and get him on a jet sweep, get him on a, quick little swing pass, run him on a quick little route out of the backfield, an arrow or something, just to get him the ball in space with a blocker out in front. I am certainly open to that. And I like Keyshawn Nixon. I think his attitude is fun. I think it's a good thing for this team. I think he's a really good return man. He was getting freaking cooked all night long by the Giants. That was rough. But you don't have any other options because you can't rely on Alexander to be out there this week. That is still concerning, obviously, that he's still banged up and recovering from that injury. Stokes, you don't know at this point. You just don't have bodies back there. So I don't know if you can throw 25 in the backfield and say, hey, make a play when you need him for close to every snap defensively. So I don't know what the fix is there. You're right. Someone has to get back because right now it's looking ugly, man. And you said it earlier, this defense still has players. They still have guys that can make plays that are talented. Antoine Winfield is still one of the better young safeties in the NFL. I know he's not quite super young anymore, but you know what I'm saying. You've got to be able to have guys who can make plays. Otherwise, even with a coach who's as bad at his job as Todd Bowles, they've got a defense that can still punish you.
Yeah, they do. And they will. That's the other thing is those guys, Levante David's still there. Devin White is still around somehow. He asked for a trade that felt like eons ago. They don't really have, they don't have the pass rush they had from a couple years ago when they won the Super Bowl. And that is really what was Green Bay's demise in that particular NFC Championship game, was their inability to block Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett. But, the hard part for this game is you feel like you're relying on Green Bay's defense to say, you got to kind of win the game for us, because the offense, I just don't know what they're going to have. And what they're going to have, is that going to be enough? This could be a big week for Matt LaFleur to kind of put his nuts on the table and say, I'm going to fix this and here's how, or, do his watered down version of the Arizona Thursday night game from a couple years ago, where Green Bay somehow won that game with you and I playing wide receiver with Aaron Rodgers and Dillon and Jones, essentially. I don't know, man. I'm trying not to be overly emotional, but Green Bay just doesn't have bodies. Yeah. And it's hard to pick a team, and Tampa Bay's flying high after a big game. Now the Packers have been better at home than they have on the road. That's normal, especially for a younger team. But I would be surprised if Green Bay covers the 3.5. This game is, to me, is 23-20 either way. And whoever is the quarterback that makes the big mistake is the one who loses the game. And Jordan Love is perfectly capable of doing that. And so is Baker Mayfield. I'm going to tentatively stick with Green Bay to win, but I reserve the right to change that on Sunday morning if I find out, hey, no Jones, no Watson, no Reed, no Wicks, no Musgrave. Oh, and surprise, surprise, John Runyon's inactive too, because why not? He got injured in practice or something.
I mean, is that addition by subtraction?
I don't know, maybe. But, you want as many interior guys as you can get against Vita Vea. So
no, you're right. No, I'm just messing with you. I need a weirder score than that. I'm of the same mind. I'm going to give the nod to Green Bay at home. I'm going to trust that Jordan Love is going to have a bounce back week. I will take the Packers in this one. I need a weirder score though. Green Bay 19, Tampa Bay 18 in the Battle of the Bays. It's going to be dumb. It's going to be ugly. At least one team's going to fail a 2-point try. That's the kind of game I think we're in for. But hey, I don't care. I am not at a point where I care about what wins look like. This team, at this point, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. This team should be worried about making the postseason right now. And if you want to do that, you got to find ways to win games one way or the other. I don't know how you're going to end up winning it. Just find a way to get it done. And
it's kind of a swing game too, right? Green Bay 6-7. If they win, they're 7-7 playing Carolina, which I think if there's anything we should have learned after last night's game is that you can't chalk one up as a win. Mm-hmm. But you should at least feel pretty good about the ability to be 8-7 going into a stretch where you play Minnesota and Chicago. And now that I've learned that Todd Varney will be in attendance, there you go. Packers by 1 million. But at any rate, 6-8. Now you have to win the rest of your games to get into the playoffs. Like, there is no more margin for error, and you may have lost like any chance to control your own destiny. So it's a big one, and it didn't have to be. You know, that's the part that's a little bit frustrating, because this game didn't have to be a big one if you just took care of business against Giants, but they didn't. So here we are.
This could have been the free money game instead of the one against the freaking New York Giants. One way or the other, we'll be talking about it coming up next week on the Pick Six, live every Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Lambeau time, across the Game On Wisconsin social media channels. You can also check out the podcast version the morning after. Until next time, for Jacob Westendorf, I'm Brendan Dworzinski. We'll talk to you guys coming up next week, right back here on the Pick Six.